Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Pause Verve. If this story touches your heart, please like the video and share it with others. Your support helps us continue bringing you more heartwarming stories. In the dim flicker of a shelter's fluorescent lights, a scarred Belgian Malinois named Rusty stands on the edge of his final chance, his eyes hiding secrets of a brutal past. 8 families have returned him, their silence masking a dangerous truth. With only 72 hours before the euthanasia order, volunteer Emily Harper risks everything to unravel his story. Will she save a dog haunted by ghosts, or uncover a darkness that threatens them both? The fluorescent lights of the Haven Animal Shelter buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows across the cold metal examination table where Rusty stood, his body trembling like a taut wire. The 5-year-old Belgian Malinois, with his sleek brown and black coat, held his head low, dark eyes darting from corner to corner of the sterile room. His ears, sharp and upright, twitched at every sound: the distant bark of another dog, the clatter of a clipboard, the soft hum of the aging air conditioner. Beneath his glossy fur, faint scars traced jagged paths, barely visible but telling, a story no one in the shelter fully understood. Rusty's muscles tensed as if braced for a threat that never came, his gaze avoiding the 2 humans standing nearby. Emily Harper, a 38-year-old librarian and dedicated shelter volunteer, clutched, a worn leash in her hands, her knuckles pale from the grip. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her hazel eyes, usually warm and steady, flickered with a mix of concern and determination as she watched Rusty. Beside her stood Harold Grayson, the shelter's manager, a wiry man, in his late 50s with graying hair and a face etched with years of tough decisions. He adjusted his glasses, peering down at a stack of paperwork on the table. 8 adoption files, each stamped with the same red word, returned. Next to them lay a single sheet, an euthanasia form, its blank signature line glaring like a guillotine. 8 families, Emily, Harold said, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of protocol. 8 tries and everyone sent him back. Board policy is clear: 4 strikes and we can't keep allocating resources. He's had double that. He tapped the euthanasia form with a pen, the sound sharp in the quiet room. 72 hours. That's all we can give him before the board makes the call. Emily's fingers tightened around the leash, her heart thudding against her ribs. She'd been volunteering at Haven for 3 years, walking dogs, cleaning kennels, and coaxing shy animals out of their shells. She'd seen countless dogs come and go, some to loving homes, others to fates she tried not to dwell on. But there was something about Rusty. His eyes, deep and soulful despite their wariness, seemed to plead for a chance no one else had given him. She glanced at the files, each one a failed promise. The reasons varied: too intense and not a good fit, too much energy. But none felt honest, none explained why a dog so striking, so alert, couldn't find a home. Harold, he's not aggressive, Emily said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Look at him, he's scared, not dangerous. She gestured toward Rusty, who stood statue still, his gaze fixed on a crack in the tiled floor. 8 families in 3 years? Something's not adding up. They're not telling us the whole story. Harold sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Maybe, but we don't have the time or resources to play detective. You know how stretched we are. Kennels are full, budgets tighter than ever. We can't keep a dog that no one wants, not when there are others with better odds. His tone softened, but only slightly. I don't like it either, but rules are rules. 3 days, Emily. Then it's out of our hands. Emily's gaze dropped to Rusty, who finally lifted his head, his dark eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment. In that glance, she saw not just fear, but a flicker of something else: trust, or maybe hope, buried deep beneath layers of betrayal. Her mind raced. She wasn't a rule-breaker. Her life was built on order, shelving books in precise Dewey Decimal rows, walking Pippa, her cheerful terrier, at exactly 6 p.m. every evening, volunteering every Saturday without fail. But as Rusty pressed closer to the table's edge, his body still but his eyes locked on her, she felt a pull she couldn't ignore. "I'll take him," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. For observation. I'll foster him at my place for the 72 hours. Give me a chance to figure out what's going on with him." Her voice trembled slightly, but her resolve held firm. Harold's eyebrows shot up, his pen freezing mid-air. "Emily, that's not how this works. You know the protocol. Fostering requires board approval, background checks, a whole process, and you've never fostered before. This isn't a beginner's dog." He gestured toward Rusty, who let out a soft whine, as if sensing the tension. "You're putting your volunteer status on the line. Maybe more." "I know," Emily replied, her voice quieter now but no less certain. "But I can't let him go without trying. 3 days, Harold. Let me prove he's worth saving." She held his gaze, her usual deference replaced by a stubborn spark Harold hadn't seen before. The room fell silent, the only sound Rusty's shallow breathing. Harold studied her, then the dog, his jaw tightening. Finally he exhaled, setting the pen down. 72 hours. Document everything, every behavior, every incident. One sign of trouble, and he's back here. And you'll answer to the board. He pointed at her, his expression a mix of warning and reluctant respect. "Don't make me regret this." Emily nodded, relief flooding through her, even as dread settled in. She knelt beside Rusty, clipping the leash to his collar, with careful hands. His body stiffened at her touch, but he didn't pull away. "Come on, boy," she whispered, her voice soft as a promise. "Let's see what you're really about." As she led him toward the shelter's exit, Rusty's nails clicked against the linoleum, each step cautious but deliberate. The fluorescent lights flickered above, and Emily felt the weight of her decision settle over her. A mix of fear, hope, and something deeper, something that told her Rusty's story was far from over. She just had to uncover it in time. Emily Harper's heart pounded as she guided Rusty through the Haven Animal Shelter's heavy glass doors, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked parking lot. The Belgian Malinois moved. With a cautious grace, his lean frame taut, ears swiveling to catch every sound. A car horn in the distance, the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. The leash felt like a lifeline in Emily's hands, tethering her to a decision she was only beginning to comprehend. She'd never broken a rule in her 3 years at the shelter, never challenged Harold's authority, or stepped outside the carefully drawn lines of her volunteer role. Yet here she was, defying protocol to save a dog who might not even trust her. She glanced back at the shelter, its faded brick facade a testament to years of scraped-together funding and relentless hope. Harold stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with a look that mingled skepticism and something softer, maybe faith or at least the memory of it. Emily knew what was at stake. Taking Rusty home without board approval wasn't just a breach of policy. It was a gamble that could cost her place at Haven, a sanctuary that had become as much her home as her own. But as Rusty paused to sniff the air, his dark eyes flickering toward her with a wary curiosity, she felt a certainty settle deep in her chest. She couldn't let him face that euthanasia form alone. "All right, Rusty," she said softly, opening the back door of her aging hatchback. "Let's get you settled." She'd prepared a crate in the back seat, lined with a blanket from home to ease the transition. Rusty hesitated, his body low to the ground, as if weighing whether this was a trap. Emily knelt beside him, keeping her movements slow, her voice a gentle hum. "It's okay, boy. Just a short ride." After a long moment, he climbed in, curling, tightly into the crate's corner, his gaze never leaving her. The drive to her bungalow was quiet save for the soft hum of the radio and Rusty's occasional whine. Emily's mind churned with questions. Why had 8 families returned him? What had they seen or hidden that made them give up on a dog so strikingly intelligent, so achingly alert? She thought of the scars she'd glimpsed under his fur, faint but deliberate, and her stomach twisted. Her father, a gruff but tender-hearted man who'd spent his retirement rescuing strays, had told her stories of dogs trained for cruel purposes, guard work, fighting, worse. "Some dogs carry ghosts," he'd said once, scratching the ears, of a mutt he'd saved from a junkyard. "You just gotta help 'em let go." Emily's bungalow came into view, a modest single-story home with white siding and a tidy front garden bursting with marigolds. The backyard, fenced and bordering a quiet park, was her haven, where she spent evenings tossing a ball for Pippa, her scrappy terrier with a penchant for stealing socks. Pippa was the opposite of Rusty, playful, trusting, a dog who'd never known betrayal. Introducing them would be a challenge, one Emily wasn't sure she was ready for. She parked in the driveway, her hands lingering on the steering wheel as she glanced at Rusty in the rearview mirror. His eyes met hers, steady, but guarded, and she felt the weight of the 72 hours ticking down. Inside, Pippa's excited yips greeted her from the kitchen, where Emily had secured her behind a baby gate. The house smelled of lavender from a candle she'd lit that morning, a small ritual to keep the chaos of the world at bay. Emily led. Rusty through the front door, keeping the leash loose but ready. He froze in the entryway, his nose twitching as he took in the unfamiliar scents. Wood polish, Pippa's faint doggy musk, the lingering trace of last night's pasta dinner. His nails clicked against the hardwood as he moved, each step measured, as if mapping an escape route. "Let's get you settled," Emily said, guiding him to the guest room she'd prepared. She'd cleared out clutter, leaving a folded quilt on the floor, a water bowl and a single chew toy. A cautious offering for a dog who might not know play. Rusty entered slowly, circling the room before settling not on the quilt, but in the corner, his back pressed against the wall, eyes fixed on the door. Emily recognized the posture from her years at the shelter. Survival mode. A dog braced for the worst. She sat cross-legged a few feet away, giving him space. "I know this is a lot," she said, her voice low and steady, "but you're safe. Here, I just need to figure out what's going on with you." Rusty's ears flicked at her words, but he didn't move, his body a coiled spring. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Harold, "Board MTG tomorrow, 8 a.m. Be ready to explain yourself." Her stomach sank. She'd have to face not just Harold, but the entire board, a group of well-meaning but overburdened volunteers who'd likely see Rusty as a liability. Emily thought of her father again, his weathered, hands gentle as he coaxed a trembling dog from a ditch. He'd died 2 years ago, his heart giving out during a walk with one of his rescues, but his lessons lingered. "Every dog deserves one person who won't give up," he'd told her. She'd clung to that through every loss at the shelter, every goodbye that broke her heart a little more. Now, with Rusty watching her from his corner, she knew she was his one person, or at least she had to try to be. She stood slowly, careful not to startle him. "We've got 3 days, buddy," she whispered. "Let's make them count." As she closed the guest room door, leaving it cracked just enough for Rusty to feel untrapped, she felt a spark of hope ignite alongside her fear. Rusty was a puzzle, a dog carrying secrets no one had bothered to unravel. But Emily was a librarian, a keeper of stories, and she was determined to read his. Emily Harper's bungalow sat nestled on a quiet street in the small town of Willow Creek, its white siding glowing softly under the golden light of dusk. The house, modest but meticulously kept, was a reflection of Emily's orderly life, a place where every book had its shelf, every dish its place in the cupboard. Marigolds bloomed in neat rows along the front walk, their vibrant orange a cheerful contrast to the muted greens of the surrounding lawn. The backyard, enclosed by a sturdy wooden fence, opened onto a narrow strip of parkland where old oaks and maples whispered in the evening breeze. It was here that Emily spent her evenings, tossing a frayed tennis ball for Pippa, her 8-year-old terrier, whose boundless energy belied her graying muzzle. The park's quiet trails and open spaces were a sanctuary, a place where Emily could breathe deeply and let the world's chaos fall away. Inside, the bungalow was warm and lived in, with hardwood floors worn smooth by years of footsteps. The living room held a sagging but cozy couch, draped with a quilt Emily's mother had made decades ago. Bookshelves lined one wall, stuffed with novels, biographies, and dog-eared manuals on animal behavior, testaments to Emily's twin passions of literature and rescue work. A faint scent of lavender lingered from the candles she lit each morning, a ritual to ground herself before facing the day. The kitchen, separated by a baby gate to keep Pippa contained, was small but functional, its counters cluttered with jars of homemade dog treats and a stack of library books due back next week. This was Emily's world, predictable and safe, until Rusty's arrival turned it upside down. The Haven Animal Shelter, where Emily had volunteered every Saturday for 3 years, was a stark contrast to her home's warmth. Housed in a squat brick building from the 1960s, the shelter stood on the edge of Willow Creek's industrial district, its faded blue paint peeling like old skin. The interior was a maze of concrete kennels and flickering fluorescent lights, the air heavy with the mingled scents of disinfectant and dog fur. Bulletin boards overflowed with adoption flyers and thank-you notes from families, but the undercurrent of strain was palpable. Too many animals, too few resources. The shelter's budget, cobbled together from donations and grants, barely covered basics, leaving little for repairs or extra staff. Yet despite its wear, Haven was a place of stubborn hope, kept alive by people who refused to give up. Harold Grayson, the shelter's manager, was the linchpin of that hope. At 58, with a wiry frame and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, Harold ran Haven with a blend of pragmatism and quiet compassion. His office, a cramped closet off the main hallway, was piled with paperwork and old coffee mugs, a testament to his endless battle against bureaucracy. Harold's rules, strict adoption protocols, limited fostering, and a 4-strike policy for unadoptable animals were born of necessity, not cruelty. Without them, Haven would have collapsed years ago under the weight of its own mission. Emily respected Harold, even when his decisions broke her heart. She'd seen him stay late to comfort a sick dog, slip treats to the shy ones, and fight tooth and nail for every grant. But she also knew he wouldn't bend those rules easily, not even for her. Emily's life followed a rhythm as steady as a metronome. Mornings were spent at the Willow Creek Public Library, where she catalogued books and helped patrons with a patience that bordered on saintly. Afternoons meant paperwork or errands, and evenings were for Pippa, walks in the park, training games, in the yard, or quiet moments on the couch with a book and Pippa's head in her lap. Volunteering at Haven was her weekend anchor, a way to honor her father's legacy. He'd been her guide in all things animal, teaching her to read a dog's body language, to earn trust with time, not force. His death 2 years ago had left a hole, one Emily filled with routine and purpose, but Rusty's presence threatened to disrupt that careful balance. As she stood in her living room now, the guest room door cracked open where Rusty lay in his corner. Emily felt the weight of her choice settle deeper. Pippa, confined to the kitchen, let out a soft whine, sensing the stranger in her home. Emily crossed to the gate, kneeling to scratch Pippa's ears. "We've got a guest, girl," she murmured. "Gonna need you to be patient." Pippa's brown eyes sparkled with curiosity, her stumpy tail wagging. But Emily knew the real test would come when the two dogs met. Rusty's file hinted at trouble, 8 returns, vague excuses, scars that spoke of a past she could only guess. And she needed to understand him, and fast. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, another text from Harold. "Board's expecting a full report. Don't skip details." Emily sighed, setting the phone down. The board, 7 volunteers, each with their own biases and priorities, wouldn't be swayed by sentiment. They'd want hard evidence that Rusty wasn't a risk, that he could be saved without draining Haven's dwindling funds. Emily wasn't sure she could deliver that in 72 hours, but she'd promised to try. She glanced toward the guest room, imagining Rusty's watchful eyes in the dark. "You're not just any dog, are you?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. The house was quiet now, save for the distant hum of crickets through an open window. Emily moved to the kitchen, filling a bowl with water for Rusty and checking Pippa's food. Her life, so carefully ordered, felt suddenly unmoored, as if Rusty's arrival had cracked open something she hadn't expected. She thought of her father's voice, steady and sure. "Every dog deserves one person." For the next 3 days, she'd be Rusty's person, rules be damned. But as she stood in the dim light of her kitchen, Pippa's soft snores filling the silence, Emily wondered if she was ready for what that might mean. Emily Harper sat at her kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp casting soft shadows across the room. A mug of chamomile tea steamed beside her, untouched, as she pored over the thin manila folder that held Rusty's life in smudged ink and bureaucratic stamps. The Haven Animal Shelter's logo stared up from the cover, a faded paw print that belied the gravity of the contents within. 8 adoption files, each a brief chapter of failure, were clipped together, their edges worn from repeated handling. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the folder, her hazel eyes scanning the pages for clues to the Belgian Malinois who now lay in her guest room, a silent enigma curled in a corner. Rusty's intake form was clinical, sparse. Male. Belgian Malinois, approximately 5 years old, found stray, no microchip, scars noted. The details of his 8 adoptions followed, each entry a variation on the same theme. Family 1. Too intense for our household. Family 3. Not a good fit with our lifestyle. Family 6. Too much energy for our kids. The excuses were vague, maddeningly so, and Emily's librarian instincts bristled at their lack of specificity. No one mentioned aggression. No one detailed specific incidents. Yet all 8 families had returned him within weeks, some within days. She jotted notes on a legal pad. Inconsistent complaints, no patterns, why hide the truth? Her pen scratching in the quiet house. Pippa slept soundly in her crate by the back door, her soft snores a comforting rhythm, but Emily's thoughts were with Rusty. She'd checked on him an hour ago, finding him still pressed against the guest room wall, his dark eyes tracking her movements with a wariness that cut deeper than she'd expected. Those eyes, coupled with the scars she'd glimpsed under his sleek coat, told a story the files didn't. She flipped to the vet's initial assessment, written by Dr. Lena Carter, Haven's overworked but sharp-eyed veterinarian. Multiple superficial scars on torso and legs, likely from trauma. Behavior suggests heightened alertness, possible history of abuse. Emily's stomach twisted. Abuse was a broad term, but the scars, faint deliberate lines, hinted at something more sinister. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a memory from a summer evening years ago when they'd sat on his porch, a rescued mutt named Daisy at their feet. "Some dogs are trained to hurt him," he'd said, his voice rough with anger. "Guard work, fighting rings, you name it. They use pain to make 'em mean, but the dog's just doing what it's taught." Her father had spent his retirement pulling dogs from ditches and backyards, nursing them back to trust. He'd died before Emily could fully inherit his courage, but his stories lingered, and Rusty's scars matched the ones he'd described on dogs used for illegal security operations, trained to attack, conditioned through cruelty. Emily picked up her phone and dialed Dr. Lena Carter, hoping the vet was still awake. It was late, nearly 10 p.m., but Lena was known for burning the midnight oil. The phone rang twice before Lena's warm, slightly tired voice answered. "Emily, everything okay with Rusty?" "I hope so," Emily said, keeping her voice low. "I'm looking at his files, Lena, and something's off. 8 returns, all with different complaints, none specific. And those scars, your notes say trauma. Could they be from something like guard dog training, something deliberate?" There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling on Lena's end. "I was wondering when you'd catch that," Lena said, finally. "Those scars aren't random. They're too precise, like someone used a blade to mark him, probably to trigger pain responses. I've seen it before in dogs from sketchy operations, private security, drug operations, sometimes worse. Rusty's behavior fits too. He's not aggressive with people, but he's hyper-vigilant, like he's waiting for a command that never comes." Emily's grip tightened on the phone. "So you think he was trained to attack? Maybe other animals?" "Possibly," Lena said. "The families didn't report aggression, but they might have been covering for him. People do that, see a good dog with a bad habit, and think the next home will be different. If Rusty was reacting to their pets, they might have kept quiet, to save him from being labeled dangerous." Emily glanced at the guest room door, imagining Rusty's tense form. That would explain the vague excuses. But why wouldn't they just say he didn't get along with their dog or cat? Why hide it? "Fear," Lena said simply. "Euthanasia's a death sentence. They probably thought they were giving him another shot." "Look, Emily, I'm with you on this. Rusty's got something worth saving. But you need to be careful. If he was trained for something illegal, his triggers could be specific, unpredictable. Keep Pippa separate until you know more." Thanks, Lena, Emily said, her mind racing. Can you check the files tomorrow, see if the family's had other pets? I need to know if that's the common thread. Already on it, Lena replied. Get some rest, okay? You've got a big day with the board tomorrow. Emily hung up, staring at the files. Her father's face flashed in her mind, his weathered smile, the way he'd kneel beside a scared dog, patient as stone. He'd been her anchor, the one who taught her that every animal had a story, even the broken ones. His death had left her adrift, pouring her grief into routine, library, shelter, Pippa. But Rusty was pulling her out of that safety, forcing her to face a truth she wasn't sure she was ready for. If he'd been trained to hurt, conditioned, through pain, then saving him, meant more than proving he wasn't dangerous. It meant undoing years of cruelty in just 72 hours. She closed the folder, her tea long cold. The house was still, Pippa's snores the only sound. Emily stood, moving quietly to the guest room. Rusty hadn't moved, his body a tight coil in the corner, eyes glinting in the dim light. "What did they do to you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And why won't anyone tell me?" Rusty's ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. Emily felt a surge of determination, tempered by fear. She was in over her head, but she wasn't alone. Her father's legacy, Lena's support, even Pippa's gentle presence, they were all part of this fight. Rusty deserved a chance, and she'd give it to him no matter what it cost. Emily Harper woke to the soft chime of her alarm at 6:30 a.m., the familiar routine of fleeting comfort before the reality of Rusty's presence flooded back. The guest room door was still cracked open, just as she'd left it, and the house was quiet save for Pippa's gentle scratching at her crate in the kitchen. Emily slipped out of bed, pulling on a sweater against the morning chill, her mind already racing. With the day's challenges, 72 hours had seemed like enough time last night, but now with the shelter board meeting looming in less than 24 hours, the ticking clock felt like a pulse in her chest. She needed to understand Rusty, his triggers, his fears, before she could convince anyone he was worth saving. She padded to the guest room, peering inside. Rusty hadn't moved from his corner, his lean Belgian Malinois frame pressed against the wall, eyes open and alert. The quilt she'd laid out remained untouched, as did the water bowl and chew toy. His stillness wasn't restful, it was the vigilance of a creature expecting danger. Emily's heart sank, but she kept her voice soft. "Morning, Rusty," she said, crouching a few feet away. "Ready for a new day?" His ears flicked, but his gaze stayed fixed on the doorway as if calculating the distance to safety. Emily clipped on his leash, keeping her movements deliberate, and led him to the backyard for a bathroom break. The fenced yard, her sanctuary. With Pippa felt different with Rusty, less a playground, more a testing ground. He moved methodically, sniffing the grass with precision, his body low and tense. The park beyond the fence was quiet, birds chirping in the oaks, but Rusty froze at every rustle, his head snapping toward the sound. Emily noted his behavior on her phone. Hyper-vigilant, reactive to noise, no aggression toward me. It was a start, but she needed more than observations to sway the board. Back inside, Emily faced the next hurdle, keeping Rusty and Pippa separate. Pippa, her scrappy terrier, was a social butterfly, eager to greet any newcomer with a wagging tail and playful yips. But Rusty's scars and Dr. Lena Carter's warning about possible animal-directed aggression made Emily cautious. She'd set up a baby gate across the kitchen doorway, ensuring Pippa's space was secure, but the terrier's curious whining echoed through the house. Rusty's ears perked at the sound, his body stiffening, and Emily tightened her grip on the leash. "Easy, boy," she murmured, guiding him back to the guest room. She couldn't risk an introduction yet, not without understanding his triggers. The guest room was Rusty's temporary haven, but it felt more like a holding cell. Emily sat on the floor, a safe distance away, watching him settle back into his corner. "You're not making this easy," she said with a small smile, hoping her voice might soothe him. She pulled out her laptop, opening a document to log his behavior, but her thoughts drifted to her father. He'd had a knack for reaching dogs like Rusty, sitting with them for hours, letting silence build trust. Emily didn't have hours. She had days, and they were slipping away. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harold. "Board's expecting you at 8 a.m. Bring detailed notes, no excuses." The message was a stark reminder of the stakes. If she failed to prove Rusty's potential, she'd lose more than her volunteer status. She'd lose him. Emily's morning routine, coffee, a quick walk with Pippa, a shower, was disrupted by Rusty's needs. She skipped the coffee, opting instead to prepare a bowl of kibble for him. He ignored it, his eyes tracking her every move. "You've got to eat sometime," she said, setting the bowl near the quilt. She wondered if his refusal was stress or something deeper, a habit from a past where food came with strings attached. The thought tightened her throat. Her father had once nursed a starved hound back to health, hand-feeding it bits of chicken until it trusted enough to eat. Emily didn't have time for that, but she resolved to try. As she moved to the kitchen to let Pippa out, Rusty's low whine stopped her. He'd risen from his corner, standing at the guest room threshold, his gaze fixed on the kitchen door where Pippa's excited scratching grew louder. Emily froze, the leash still in her hand. "Not yet, buddy," she said, her voice calm but firm. She closed the guest room door fully this time, her heart pounding. The separation was necessary, but it felt like a betrayal, locking Rusty away while Pippa bounded free. Pippa's joy at being released was a stark contrast. Her stumpy tail wagged furiously as she leaped into Emily's arms, oblivious to the tension. Emily took Pippa for a quick walk, keeping to the park's quieter paths to avoid other dogs. Her mind churned with questions. What had Rusty been through to make him so guarded? Why had 8 families hidden the truth about his returns? She thought of Dr. Lena's suspicion that Rusty's aggression might be animal-specific, triggered by other pets. If true, it explained the vague excuses, the family's reluctance to doom him with an aggressive label. But it also meant Emily's home, with Pippa's lively presence, was a minefield. Back home, Emily settled Pippa in the living room and returned to Rusty. She opened the guest room door, leash in hand, and found him pacing, his nails clicking against the hardwood. His eyes met hers, not with trust but with a question, as if asking what came next. Emily knelt, extending a hand palm down, a gesture her father had taught her to signal safety. "We're in this together," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. Rusty stopped pacing, his head tilting slightly, and for a moment she thought he might approach. But he returned to his corner, sinking down with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his unseen scars. Emily stood, brushing off her jeans. The board meeting was tomorrow, and she had nothing concrete to show, no breakthroughs, no proof that Rusty could be saved. But as she looked at him, his dark eyes glinting with a spark of something unbroken, she felt her resolve harden. She'd find a way to reach him, to uncover the truth behind his past. For now, she'd keep him safe, keep Pippa separate, and keep digging. The clock was ticking, but Emily Harper wasn't ready to give up. Emily Harper stood in her living room, the morning sun filtering through the curtains and casting warm stripes across the hardwood floor. The clock on the mantel read 7:15 a.m., less than an hour before she'd need to leave for the Haven Animal Shelter's board meeting. Her legal pad was filled with notes on Rusty's behavior, hypervigilant, food refusal, no human aggression, but they felt thin, insufficient to convince a skeptical board to spare the Belgian Malinois. Rusty's leash was clipped to his collar, and she held it loosely, her other hand resting on the baby gate that separated the living room from the kitchen, where Pippa's eager whines grew louder. Emily had planned a brief, controlled introduction between the two dogs, hoping to gauge Rusty's reaction to Pippa before presenting her case to the board. It was a risk, but she needed something tangible to show progress. "Okay, Rusty," Emily said, her voice calm but laced with tension. "Let's see how you do with a friend." Rusty stood alert, his lean frame rigid, ears swiveling toward the kitchen, his dark eyes locked on the gate, where Pippa's small, wiry form was visible, her stumpy tail a blur of excitement. Emily had readied a pocket full of high-value treats, bits of freeze-dried liver, a shelter trick for distracting anxious dogs. She opened the gate just enough for Pippa to slip through, keeping Rusty's leash short but not taut, her body positioned to intervene if needed. At first it seemed promising. Pippa bounded into the living room, her terrier energy filling the space as she sniffed the air, curious but cautious. Rusty's posture stiffened, his hackles rising slightly, but he didn't growl, his gaze tracking Pippa's every move. Emily exhaled, her fingers brushing a treat in her pocket. "Good boy," she murmured, ready to reward his restraint. Pippa, oblivious to the tension, trotted closer, her head tilted in playful invitation. Emily's heart lifted. Maybe Rusty's reactivity was overstated. Maybe the family's fears were exaggerated. Then it happened. Pippa, in her exuberance, darted forward, her front paws skittering on the floor as she let out a high-pitched "Yeep!" The sound was like a switch flipped in Rusty. His body transformed in an instant, muscles coiling, lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth, a low, guttural growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Before Emily could react, he lunged, the leash snapping taut as he strained toward Pippa, his eyes wild with a focus that chilled her. Pippa froze, her playful demeanor vanishing as she cowered, a soft whimper escaping her. "Rusty, no!" Emily shouted, planting her feet and pulling back with all her strength. The leash held, but Rusty's growl deepened, his body quivering with intent, saliva glistening on his bared teeth. Pippa scrambled backward, her nails scrabbling against the hardwood as she fled toward the couch. Emily's heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her system as she dragged Rusty toward the guest room, his resistance making every step a battle. She managed to get him inside, slamming the door shut and leaning against it, her breath coming in. Ragged gasps. "Oh, Pippa," Emily whispered, rushing to check on her terrier. Pippa was tucked under the couch, trembling but unharmed, her brown eyes wide with confusion. Emily coaxed her out, running her hands over Pippa's wiry fur to ensure no scratches, her guilt a heavy weight. "I'm so sorry, girl," she murmured, cradling Pippa's small body. The incident had lasted seconds, but it confirmed Dr. Lena Carter's warning. Rusty's aggression was real, likely triggered by other animals, and it explained why 8 families had returned him with vague excuses. They'd seen this side of him, this sudden terrifying switch, and chosen to protect him by hiding the truth. Emily's hands shook as she set Pippa in her crate with a treat, ensuring the kitchen gate was secure. She returned to the guest room, opening the door cautiously. Rusty was back in his corner, his body relaxed but his eyes watchful, as if the outburst had never happened. The contrast was jarring, almost surreal. "So that's it," Emily said, her voice barely above, a whisper. "That's why they sent you back." She sank to the floor, keeping her distance, her mind racing. If Rusty reacted this way to Pippa, a harmless terrier, then every family with a pet, dog, cat, even a rabbit, would have faced the same problem. But why hide it? Why risk his life by leaving the shelter in the dark? She pulled out her phone, texting Lena. Rusty lunged at Pippa, no contact but aggressive. "Think it's animal-specific. Can you confirm if all 8 families had pets?" Lena's reply came quickly. "On it." "Be careful, Em. That's a big trigger. I'll call you after I check files." Emily nodded to herself, her resolve hardening despite the fear lingering in her chest. Rusty wasn't a monster. He was a dog shaped by cruelty, his reactions carved into him by a past she was only beginning to understand. Her father's words echoed. Some dogs carry ghosts. Rusty's ghosts were alive and snarling, but Emily wasn't ready to give up on him. The clock now read 7:40 a.m. She had to leave for the board meeting soon, with little to show but a dangerous incident and a theory about hidden truths. She grabbed her legal pad, scribbling a new note. Confirmed animal aggression. Likely reason for returns. Families protected him. It was a start, but the board would want solutions, not problems. Emily looked at Rusty, his dark eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment, and saw not just fear but a plea. She had to find a way to reach him, to prove he could heal before his time ran out. As she gathered her things, the weight of the morning settled over her. The incident with Pippa had shaken her confidence, but it also clarified her mission. Rusty's aggression wasn't random. It was a scar, as real as the ones on his body, and understanding it was the key to saving him. She clipped the leash to his collar, her hands steadier now. "We're not done yet," she told him, her voice firm. "Let's go face the board." Emily Harper's hands gripped the steering wheel as she drove toward the Haven Animal Shelter, the morning air crisp through her cracked window. Rusty sat in the crate in the back seat, his silhouette visible in the rearview mirror, his dark eyes fixed on the passing world with that same wary intensity. The incident with Pippa still pulsed in Emily's mind. Rusty's sudden lunge, the raw edge of his growl, Pippa's frightened whimper. It had shaken her, but it also lit a spark of clarity. The Belgian Malinois' aggression toward other animals was the key to his 8 returns, the secret those families had buried to shield him from euthanasia. Now, with the board meeting just minutes away, Emily needed evidence to turn her hunch into a case strong enough to save him. The shelter's brick facade loomed ahead, its chipped blue paint a familiar sight that today felt foreboding. Emily parked, her legal pad tucked under her arm, Rusty's leash in hand. He stepped out of the crate cautiously, his movements precise, as if mapping the parking lot for threats. She knelt beside him, her voice soft. "We've got to make them see you, Rusty, the real you." His ears twitched, but his gaze stayed distant, locked on the shelter's entrance. Emily's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Lena Carter. "Checked files. Call me before you go in." Her pulse quickened. Lena had answers. Emily dialed, keeping Rusty close as she stood by her car. Lena answered on the first ring, her voice brisk but warm. "Emily, you were right. Every single one of the 8 families had pets. 4 had dogs, 3 had cats, 1 had both plus a guinea pig. None mentioned aggression in their return forms, but Family 5 wrote, 'Didn't mesh with our pack,' which is as close as it gets." Emily's breath caught. "So they all saw what I saw, Rusty reacting to their animals, but didn't report it." "Exactly," Lena said. "They knew if they labeled him aggressive, he'd be put down. People get attached, even in a few weeks. They probably hoped the next family wouldn't have pets or could handle him better." Emily's mind raced, piecing it together. That's why the complaints were so vague, are too intense, are not a fit. They were protecting him. She glanced at Rusty, who stood alert, his scars barely visible under his sleek coat. "But, Lena, those you said they're deliberate. Could they be from training? Something that made him react this way?" There was a pause, the sound of Lena flipping papers. "I've been thinking about that since you called last night. The scars are too clean for random fights. They're strategic, like someone used a blade to condition him. I've seen it in dogs trained for illegal security, drug operations, property guarding. They inflict pain to make the dog associate other animals with threat. Rusty's reactivity fits that pattern. He's fine with humans, but another dog or cat flips a switch." Emily's stomach twisted, her father's stories flooding back. He'd spoken of dogs like Rusty, trained through cruelty to become weapons, their instincts warped by human greed. "So someone did this to him on purpose," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And the families saw the aftermath, but didn't know how to fix it, or didn't want to admit it," Lena added. "If he came from that kind of background, his triggers are deep. You're doing the right thing by keeping him and Pippa separate, but you'll need more than 72 hours to undo that kind of conditioning." Emily nodded, though Lena couldn't see it. "I'm about to face the board. Any chance you can back me up on this?" "I'm already here," Lena said. "I'll be in the meeting, and I've got copies of the files to show the pet pattern. We'll make them listen." "Thanks, Lena," Emily said, hanging up. She looked down at Rusty, who met her gaze for a fleeting moment, his eyes holding a mix of caution and something softer, trust maybe, or the beginnings of it. The weight of his past settled over her, heavy but galvanizing. He wasn't just a dog with a problem. He was a survivor of deliberate cruelty, and his returns were the result of family's compassion, misguided though it was. She had to make the board see that. Inside the shelter, the conference room was a cramped space with a wobbly table and mismatched chairs. The board, 7 volunteers ranging from a retired teacher to a local accountant, sat with varying degrees of impatience. Harold stood at the head, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Lena was already there, a stack of files in front of her, offering Emily a nod of encouragement. Rusty sat by Emily's side, his leash loose, his behavior impeccable, despite the tension in the room. Harold cleared his throat. Emily, you've got 72 hours to observe Rusty. You've had one. What do you have for us? Emily stood, her notes in hand, her voice steady despite the nerves coiling in her gut. Rusty's returns aren't random, she began. All 8 families had pets, and I believe he reacted aggressively to them, just as he did to my dog. Pippa this morning. They didn't report it to protect him from euthanasia. But his aggression isn't his fault. She gestured to Lena, who slid the files across the table. Dr. Carter confirmed the pet connection, and Rusty's scars suggest he was trained deliberately to attack other animals, likely for illegal security work. Murmurs rippled through the board. The retired teacher, Mrs. Ellison, frowned. That makes him dangerous, doesn't it? If he's trained to attack, how can we justify keeping him? He's not dangerous to people, Emily countered, her voice firm. He's been perfect with me. His scars, clean, precise cuts, show he was conditioned through pain. We can't punish him for what someone else did. She knelt beside Rusty, her hand resting lightly on his back. He didn't flinch, his eyes fixed on her, and the board noticed Lena spoke up. I've seen dogs like Rusty recover with the right training. It's slow but possible. Emily's already started observing his triggers. We just need time. Harold's jaw tightened. Time and resources we don't have. Emily, you've got 48 hours left. Show us progress or we follow policy. His tone was gruff, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. As Emily led Rusty out, her mind churned. She had the truth, Rusty's past, the family's silence, but truth wasn't enough. She needed a plan to heal him, and she needed it fast. Emily Harper sat cross-legged on her living room floor, a notebook open beside her, and a bag of freeze-dried liver treats within reach. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, warming the hardwood, and casting a soft glow on the baby gate she'd installed at the hallway's end. Beyond it, in the kitchen, Pippa lay on her bed, her terrier ears perked as she watched the proceedings with curious eyes. Rusty, leashed and lying a safe distance away in the living room, fixed his gaze on the gate, his Belgian Malinois frame, tense but still. The board meeting had bought Emily 48 more hours to prove Rusty could be saved, and she was determined to make every second count. The truth about his past, trained through pain for illegal security work, had given her a map to his behavior, but now she needed to redraw it, to teach him that other animals weren't threats. Emily had spent the morning researching desensitization and counter-conditioning, diving into online forums and shelter manuals her father had left behind. The process was straightforward in theory. Expose Rusty to Pippa at a distance where he wouldn't react, reward calm behavior, and gradually close the gap over time. In practice, it was a tightrope walk, especially after his lunging incident with Pippa. Emily's heart still ached at the memory of Pippa's frightened whimper, but she pushed it aside. Rusty wasn't the enemy, his conditioning was, and if she could undo even a fraction of that cruelty, she might save him. Okay, Rusty, Emily said, her voice low and steady, a tone she'd learned from years of calming, skittish shelter dogs. Let's start small. She held a treat between her fingers, letting its scent drift toward him. Rusty's nose twitched, his eyes flickering from the gate to her hand. He didn't move, but the absence of a growl was a victory. Emily tossed the treat gently, landing it a foot from his paws. He sniffed it, then ate it, his movements cautious but deliberate. She scribbled in her notebook. Day 1, Session 1. Accepts. Treat. No aggression at Pippa's presence, 15 FT away. The baby gate was her lifeline, a clear barrier that let Rusty see Pippa without risk. Pippa, bless her, seemed to sense the stakes lying quietly instead of her usual bounding. Emily had moved Pippa's bed to the kitchen's edge, close enough for Rusty to notice, but far enough to keep him below his reaction threshold. She'd read that finding this safe distance was critical. Too close and he'd spiral. Too far and he'd learn nothing. 15 feet felt right for now, based on his stillness. Emily repeated the process for 10 minutes, tossing a treat each. Time Rusty looked at Pippa without tensing. His body language was her guide, ears forward but not pinned, tail low but not tucked, no raised hackles. Good boy, she said each time, her voice a steady anchor. By the session's end, Rusty had eaten 6 treats, and his gaze lingered on Pippa with curiosity rather than fixation. Emily's chest swelled with cautious hope. It was a tiny step, but it was progress, and she'd document every bit for the board. She stood, stretching her stiff legs, and led Rusty back to the guest room for a break. He settled in his corner, his eyes following her as she closed the door. "Rest up," she told him. "We've got more work to do." In the kitchen, Pippa greeted her with a wagging tail, and Emily knelt to scratch her ears. "You're a champ, girl, helping more than you know." Pippa's warmth steadied her, a reminder of why she was fighting for Rusty. Her father had always said dogs could heal each other, given time and care. Emily hoped he was right. Her phone buzzed. Lena checking in. "How's it going?" "The eye." "Vet asked," when Emily answered. "Started desensitization," Emily said, leaning against the counter. "He's calm at 15 feet, taking treats. No growling. It's slow, but it's something." "That's huge for day 1, Lena said, her voice bright with encouragement. "Keep logging everything. The board will want data, not just stories. And Emily, you're doing what most wouldn't. Rusty's lucky to have you." Emily smiled, though her exhaustion lingered. "Thanks, Lena. Any word on the family's pets?" "Still digging," Lena said. "I'm cross-referencing vet records to confirm. But it's looking like every return tied to animal conflict. I'll have a full report for the board tomorrow." Emily hung up, her mind turning to the scars on Rusty's body, those precise, deliberate cuts. They were proof of his past, a past she was now unraveling through training. She opened her laptop, adding her session notes to a growing document, each entry a brick in the case she'd present to the board. Session 1, 10 minutes, 6 treats. Calm at 15 deft. Next goal, reduce distance to 12 eft. She included photos of Rusty lying quietly, his eyes softer than they'd been yesterday. Evidence, not emotion, would save him. As evening fell, Emily ran another session, this time shortening the distance to 14 feet. Rusty tensed once when Pippa shifted, but a quick treat redirected him, and he settled. Emily's heart lifted. 2 sessions, no aggression. She rewarded Pippa with a belly rub, noting her terrier's patience in her log too. Pippa's role was as crucial as Rusty's, a steady presence that didn't provoke but didn't retreat. By nightfall, Emily was drained, her body heavy from the day's emotional toll. She sat in the living room, the house quiet except for Pippa's snores and the distant hum of crickets outside. Rusty's progress was fragile, a thread she could snap with one wrong move. The board would demand more tomorrow, proof that Rusty could coexist, that he wasn't a liability. Emily thought of her father, his hands gentle on a trembling dog, his belief that every animal deserved a chance. She'd inherited that belief, and now it was her shield. She checked on Rusty one last time, finding him in his corner, eyes half closed but still watchful. "We're getting there," she whispered, her voice a promise. "One step at a time." As she closed the door, leaving it cracked, she felt a flicker of hope. Rusty was more than his scars, more than his past. She just had to prove it before time ran out. Emily Harper woke to the sharp bark of a neighbor's dog, the sound slicing through the early morning stillness of her bungalow. She sat up in bed, her heart racing, the echo of Rusty's growl from yesterday's incident with Pippa still lingering in her mind. The clock read 6:15 a.m., and the board meeting, her final chance to prove Rusty's potential, was just hours away. She'd made progress yesterday, with Rusty staying calm at 14 feet from Pippa during their desensitization sessions, but the fragility of that progress weighed on her. One misstep could unravel everything, and the neighbor's dog was a reminder of how unpredictable the world could be. She slipped on a hoodie and checked the guest room. Rusty was awake, lying in his corner, his Belgian Malinois frame alert but not tense. His dark eyes met hers, holding a flicker of recognition that warmed her despite her nerves. "Morning, buddy," she said softly, clipping on his leash for a quick backyard break. The yard was quiet, the park beyond the fence still cloaked in dawn's haze, but Rusty moved with his usual caution, sniffing the grass methodically. Emily noted his behavior in her growing log. Day 2, 6:20 a.m. Calm outdoors, no reaction to distant barking. Every detail mattered now. Back inside, Emily prepared for another training session, determined to push Rusty's boundaries before the board meeting. She set up the baby gate, positioning Pippa's bed at 12 feet from Rusty's spot in the living room, a small but deliberate reduction in distance. Pippa, her terrier tail wagging, seemed unfazed by yesterday's scare, her trust in Emily absolute. Emily envied that trust as she knelt beside Rusty, a handful of liver treats ready. "Let's do this," she murmured, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. The session began well. Rusty lay on the floor, his eyes flicking between Pippa and the treats Emily offered. She rewarded each moment of calm, tossing treats, when he looked away from Pippa or relaxed his ears. "Good boy," she said, her heart lifting as he took the treats without tensing. They were 5 minutes in, Rusty holding steady, when disaster struck. A delivery truck rumbled down the street, its engine backfiring with a loud crack that echoed like a gunshot. Rusty's reaction was instantaneous, his body coiled, hackles rising, a deep growl erupting as he lunged toward Pippa's gate. Emily yanked the leash, her arms straining against his strength. "Rusty, no!" she shouted, her voice sharp with panic. Pippa yelped, scrambling back, her small body pressed against the kitchen wall. Rusty's growl turned to a snarl, his teeth bared, eyes locked on Pippa with a ferocity that chilled Emily. She dragged him toward the guest room, his claws scraping the hardwood, and shut the door, her breath ragged. Pippa whimpered from the kitchen, unharmed but shaken, and Emily's knees buckled as she sank to the floor, guilt and doubt crashing over her. "I pushed too far," she whispered, burying her face in her hands. The setback wasn't just a training failure, it was a blow to her case for the board. She'd planned to show steady progress, proof that Rusty could learn to coexist, but now she had a fresh incident, one that reinforced his danger. Her phone buzzed. Lena texting, "At shelter. Board's assembling early. You okay?" Emily's fingers hovered over the screen, unsure how to admit she'd faltered. Instead, she called Lena, her voice trembling as she recounted the incident. "It was the noise," Emily said, pacing the living room. "He was fine until that truck backfired. I moved Pippa too close, and now—" "Lena, what if I've ruined his chance?" "Slow down," Lena said, her tone calm but firm. "Setbacks are normal, especially with a dog like Rusty. That backfire probably triggered a memory. Loud noises are common in abusive training environments. You didn't ruin anything. You're learning his limits. Bring your notes to the board, show them the progress before this. They need to see the whole picture." Emily nodded, though her confidence was frayed. "I don't know if they'll listen. Harold's already on edge and Mrs. Ellison thinks he's too risky." "That's why I'm here," Lena said. "And I've got someone else coming. Marcus Tate, a trainer who specializes in traumatized dogs. He's worked with cases like Rusty's and he's willing to consult. He'll be at the meeting to back you up." Emily's breath hitched, relief mingling with gratitude. "Marcus Tate, how did you—" "Called in a favor," Lena said, a smile in her voice. "He's local, semi-retired, but he's the best. Focus on Rusty for now. Get him settled. And we'll handle the board together." Emily hung up, her resolve flickering back to life. She checked on Pippa, who was curled in her bed, wary but calming under Emily's gentle strokes. "You're okay, girl," Emily murmured, guilt still gnawing at her. She returned to the guest room, opening the door slowly. Rusty was in his corner, his body subdued, eyes downcast as if he sensed her disappointment. "It's not your fault," she told him, kneeling at a safe distance. "We'll figure this out." She spent the next hour re-establishing calm, offering Rusty treats, from a greater distance, back to 15 feet from Pippa's gate. He took them, his posture loosening slightly, and Emily logged every detail. Post-incident 7:45 a.m. Accepts treats. No aggression at 15 FT, sensitive to loud noises. It wasn't the leap she'd hoped for, but it was proof he could recover. From a trigger. Marcus's involvement gave her a lifeline. She wouldn't face the board alone. As she gathered her notes and Rusty's leash for the meeting, Emily thought of her father. He'd faced setbacks too, dogs who snapped or cowered, yet he'd never lost faith. "Trust takes time," he'd said, his hand steady on a trembling muzzle. Emily clung to that now, her fear tempered by determination. Rusty's setback was a hurdle, not a dead end, And with Lena and Marcus's support, she had a fighting chance to prove it. She led Rusty to the car, his steps hesitant but obedient. "We're not giving up," she told him, her voice firm. The board awaited, and, with them, Rusty's fate. Emily wasn't ready to let his story end here. Emily Harper stood outside the Haven Animal Shelter, the morning sun glinting off the shelter's faded brick facade as she steadied her nerves. Rusty sat beside her, his leash loose in her hand, his Belgian Malinois frame alert, but calmer than she'd expected after the morning's setback. The board meeting loomed, a make-or-break moment to secure more time for Rusty's rehabilitation. Emily's legal pad, crammed with notes and photos of his progress, felt like a shield, but the memory of his lunge at Pippa gnawed at her confidence. Dr. Lena Carter's promise of Marcus Tate's support was a lifeline. Yet Emily knew the board, especially skeptics like Mrs. Ellison, would demand hard evidence that Rusty wasn't a lost cause. As she led him toward the entrance, Rusty's dark eyes met hers, holding a flicker of trust that bolstered her resolve. Inside, the conference room buzzed with tension. The 7 board members sat around the wobbly table, their expressions ranging from curious to guarded. Harold Grayson stood at the head, his arms crossed, his grey eyes scanning Emily's notes. Lena was already there, a stack of files confirming the pet connection in Rusty's returns at her side. Marcus Tate, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with weathered hands and a quiet authority, leaned against the wall, his presence a steady anchor. Emily took a deep breath, kneeling briefly to stroke Rusty's flank. "We've got this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Harold opened the meeting with a nod. "Emily, you've had 24 hours. Show us why Rusty deserves an extension." His tone was gruff but not unkind, a sign he was rooting for her, even if protocol bound him. Emily stood, her voice steady as she laid out Rusty's case. Rusty's 8 returns were because of animal-directed aggression, triggered by his past, she began, passing around Lena's files. Every family had pets, and they hid his reactions to protect him from euthanasia. His scars, deliberate, cuts, prove he was trained through pain, likely for illegal security work. But he's not dangerous to people, and he's shown progress. She clicked through photos on her laptop, Rusty taking treats, lying calmly at 15 feet from Pippa. She admitted the morning's setback, her honesty earning a few nods. A loud noise triggered him, but he recovered quickly. With time, he can learn. Marcus stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "I've worked with dogs like Rusty for decades. His behavior is textbook for trauma-based conditioning. Emily's desensitization is on the right track, slow but effective. I'd recommend a 3-week extension with my consultation to refine her methods." His endorsement shifted the room's mood, softening Mrs. Ellison's frown. The board deliberated, and after a tense vote, Harold announced a 2-week extension, with conditions: daily logs, no incidents with Pippa, and Marcus's oversight. Emily exhaled, relief flooding her, but the real work was just beginning. As she left the shelter, Marcus pulled her aside. "You're doing good work, but don't expect miracles. Rusty's triggers are wired deep. Keep Pippa safe and call me tomorrow." Back home, Emily resumed training, her confidence buoyed by the extension. She set up the baby gate, keeping Pippa at 15 feet, and rewarded Rusty's calm glances with treats. Something unexpected emerged during the session: Pippa's behavior. The terrier, usually a whirlwind of energy, lay still, her head resting on her paws, watching Rusty with an almost deliberate calm. When Rusty's ears flicked toward her, Pippa looked away, her body language non-threatening, as if she sensed his tension. Emily paused, her pen hovering over her notebook. "You're helping him, aren't you?" she murmured, scratching Pippa's ears later. That evening, Emily sifted through a box of her father's old photos, a ritual she rarely allowed herself since his death. His face, lined, smiling, always beside a dog, stirred a familiar ache. One photo stopped her cold, her father kneeling beside a Belgian Malinois puppy, its markings eerily similar to Rusty's, dated 3 years ago, just before his heart attack. The caption read, "New rescue, tough road ahead." Emily's breath caught. Could it be Rusty? She calculated the timeline. Rusty was 5 now, and a puppy then would fit. Her father had been rescuing dogs from rough situations, including a bust of an illegal operation. Had he crossed paths with Rusty before his death? She texted Lena the photo, her fingers trembling. Could this be Rusty as a puppy? Dad took this 3 years ago. Lena's reply was swift. Markings match. Timing works. Your dad was working on something big back then. Shut down a guard dog ring. Rusty could have been part of it. Emily stared at the photo, her father's hand gentle on the puppy's head. If Rusty was that dog, their connection ran deeper than she'd imagined. Her father had saved countless animals, and now, through Rusty, he was guiding her to finish what he'd started. The realization deepened her resolve. Rusty wasn't just a shelter case. He was a link to her father's legacy, a chance to honor the man who'd taught her to fight for the broken ones. She glanced at Rusty, now resting near the guest room door, his body less rigid than before. Pippa's unexpected patience, her father's photo, they were signs she wasn't alone in this. Rusty's progress was fragile, but it was real, and Pippa's calm presence seemed to steady him in ways Emily hadn't anticipated. She logged the day's observations, noting Pippa's behavior. Pippa models calm, maybe aiding Rusty's desensitization. The board's extension, Marcus's expertise, and this newfound connection gave her a path forward. As night fell, Emily sat on the couch, Pippa curled beside her. Rusty's eyes glinted from the guest room, watching her with a curiosity that felt like progress. "We're a team now," she told him, her voice soft but sure. Her father's belief. Every dog deserves. One person burned bright in her chest. Rusty's story was tied to her past, and she'd fight to give him a future. Emily Harper stood in her backyard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass as she tossed a treat to Rusty. The Belgian Malinois caught it mid-air, his movements precise but less guarded than they'd been a week ago. 10 days into his 2-week extension, Rusty's progress was undeniable. He could now remain calm with Pippa at 8 feet, separated by the baby gate, and his wariness had softened into cautious curiosity. Emily's notebook brimmed with detailed logs. Day 10, Session 3. No growling, accepts treats, tail neutral at 8 FT. Marcus Tate's training tweaks, using higher value rewards and shorter sessions, had worked wonders, and Pippa's unexpected calm continued to anchor Rusty's recovery. Yet, as Emily clipped Rusty's leash for a walk, a nagging unease lingered. The board's final review was in 4 days, and while she'd built a strong case, Rusty's future hinged on their willingness to see him as more than a risk. Her phone buzzed as she led Rusty back inside, a text from Lena. "Board MTG moved to tomorrow. Urgent issue. Call me." Emily's stomach dropped. She dialed Lena, keeping Rusty close as he settled near the guest room door. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight. Lena's tone was grim. "A man showed up at the shelter today, claiming Rusty. Says his name's Blaze and he's got papers, registration, vet records, the works. Calls himself Victor Crane. He's demanding immediate release. Says Rusty was stolen from his property last year." Emily's blood ran cold, her grip tightening on the phone. "Stolen? Rusty was a stray, no chip, no record of an owner. How can he—" "He's got documentation," Lena cut in. "Looks legit on paper, but something's off. Harold's called an emergency board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to address it. Crane's coming, and he's bringing a lawyer. Emily, this could override everything you've done." Emily sank onto the couch, Pippa nudging her hand with a soft whine. Rusty's eyes met hers from across the room, steady but searching, as if sensing her distress. "What do we know about this?" "Crane guy?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay even. "Not much yet," Lena said, "but Marcus knows him. Says Crane's name has come up in dog trafficking investigations. Guard dog rings mostly. Never convicted, but shady. Marcus is coming to the meeting to weigh in. Bring your logs, your photos, everything. We'll fight this." Emily hung up, her mind reeling. Victor Crane's claim threatened to undo 10 days of painstaking progress, to rip Rusty from the safety she'd built. The photo of her father with a Belgian Malinois puppy, possibly Rusty, flashed in her mind. tying this fight to her father's legacy. If Crane was linked to the same illegal operations her father had fought, Rusty's scars and aggression made chilling sense. She couldn't let him go back to that world. She moved to the guest room, kneeling beside Rusty. "No one's taking you," she whispered, her hand hovering near his fur, not touching but close enough to offer comfort. Rusty's ears flicked, his body still, and for the first time he leaned slightly toward her, a gesture so small it nearly broke her heart. She grabbed her laptop, pulling up her training logs and photos, organizing them into a presentation. For the board, every calm moment, every treat taken, every softened glance was evidence that Rusty was healing. But Crane's claim, backed by legal documents, loomed like a storm cloud. That evening Marcus called, his voice steady but urgent. "Crane's bad news, Emily. I've seen his dogs, trained to attack, half-starved, scarred like Rusty. His papers might check out, but they're likely forged. If he gets Rusty, it's back to a cage or worse. Bring those scars to the meeting, photograph them clearly. They're proof of abuse, and abuse trumps ownership claims." Emily spent the night photographing Rusty's scars, her hands shaking as she parted his fur to reveal the precise blade-like marks. She added them to her presentation, alongside her father's photo, a hunch she couldn't shake. If Rusty was the puppy her father had rescued, Crane's claim might unravel under scrutiny. She barely slept, her dreams haunted by Rusty's bewildered eyes as he was led away. The next morning, the shelter's conference room was packed, the air thick with tension. Harold stood at the front, Lena and Marcus flanking Emily, who kept Rusty close on a short leash. The board members whispered, their eyes darting to the door as Victor Crane entered, a tall man in his 40s with a polished suit and a smile. That didn't reach his eyes. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman, carried a briefcase bulging with documents. Crane's gaze lingered on Rusty, and Emily noticed his hands, scarred knuckles, the kind earned in rough trades. Her skin prickled. Harold called the meeting to order. "We're here to review Rusty's status and a new ownership claim by Mr. Victor Crane. Emily, present your case first." Emily stood, her voice steady as she walked through Rusty's progress. 10 days of desensitization, reduced reactivity, no human aggression. She showed photos of his calm moments, then the scars, her voice rising with conviction. "These aren't accidental. They're deliberate, from training for illegal security work. Rusty's aggression is learned, not innate, and he's improving. Returning him to an abuser would undo everything," Crane's lawyer countered smoothly, presenting registration papers and photos of Crane with a Malinois puppy. "My client's dog Blaze was stolen 18 months ago. These documents prove ownership. The shelter's holding his property illegally." Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room. "I know Victor Crane. His name's tied to dog trafficking rings, guard dogs, attack training. Those scars match his methods. I've seen his operations dodge charges, but the dogs don't lie." He pointed to Rusty, who sat calmly beside Emily, a stark contrast to Crane's cold demeanor. Crane's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "Baseless accusations," he snapped. "I breed working dogs, nothing more." Emily's heart pounded as she pulled up her father's photo. "This is my father, 3 years ago, with a Malinois puppy that could be Rusty. He was shutting down a guard dog ring before he died. If Mr. Crane's involved, we need to investigate before handing Rusty over." The room erupted in murmurs. Harold raised a hand. "Enough. We'll review the evidence and vote." As the board deliberated, Crane's lawyer whispered urgently to him, and Emily felt a chill. If they lost, Rusty's fate was sealed. Emily Harper stood in the Haven Animal Shelter's conference room, her heart pounding as the board members deliberated behind closed doors. Rusty sat beside her, his Belgian Malinois frame steady, his dark eyes fixed on her with a trust that felt hard-won and precious. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of Victor Crane's ownership claim hanging over them like a guillotine. Crane and his lawyer sat across the room, his polished facade cracking under Marcus Tate's accusations and Emily's evidence, Rusty's deliberate scars, her father's photo tying the dog to a past rescue. Lena Carter squeezed Emily's shoulder, her presence a quiet anchor, while Marcus stood near the door, his weathered face grim but resolute. Harold Grayson emerged, his expression unreadable, and called the room to order. "The board's reached a decision," Harold said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Based on the evidence of abuse, Rusty's scars and Mr. Tate's testimony, we're withholding release pending an investigation into Mr. Crane's operations. The shelter retains custody, and Emily, you're authorized to continue rehabilitation." "For another month." He turned to Crane, whose jaw tightened. "Mr. Crane, your claim is on hold. Any legal action will be addressed with our attorney." Crane stood, his smile gone, eyes flashing with barely concealed fury. "This isn't over," he snapped, his lawyer scrambling to follow as he stormed out. Emily exhaled, relief flooding her, but Marcus's warning glance tempered her joy. "He'll fight," he murmured. "Stay vigilant." Lena nodded, adding, "I'm digging into Crane's past with the police. Your father's photo might be the key." Emily led Rusty to her car, her mind swirling. The reprieve was a victory, but Crane's threat loomed and Rusty's rehabilitation was far from complete. Back home, she resumed training with renewed urgency, guided by Marcus's techniques. She introduced parallel play, tossing a toy for Pippa while rewarding Rusty for calm observation, slowly shifting his association with other animals from threat to neutral. By week 3, Rusty could sit 6 feet from Pippa without reacting, his tail occasionally thumping when Emily praised him. Pippa's role grew profound, her deliberate calm, turning her head away when Rusty tensed, seemed almost intuitive, as if she understood his trauma. Emily logged every milestone. Week 3, Session 4, 6FT, no growling, engages with toy. One evening, Emily found a journal in her father's old box, its pages filled with notes from his final rescue, a guard dog ring. Bust. A single entry chilled her. "Puppy, Malinois, marked for attack training. Saved him, but the operation's bigger than I thought." A grainy photo was tucked inside, showing a young Rusty in a crate, his markings unmistakable. Emily's breath caught. Her father had saved Rusty, only for him to be lost again until fate brought him to her. She shared the journal with Lena, who passed it to the police, triggering a raid on Crane's property. The findings were damning: caged dogs, training equipment, and records linking Crane to a regional trafficking network. Crane was arrested, his claim to Rusty nullified. The shelter board, moved by the evidence and Rusty's progress, voted unanimously to grant Emily permanent custody. At the meeting, Emily presented her plan, a haven program for traumatized dogs, with Rusty as its ambassador. "He's proof healing is possible," she said, Rusty sitting calmly beside her, Pippa's photo on the screen as his unlikely partner. The board approved, with Harold's rare smile sealing the moment. "Your father would be proud," he told her later, his voice thick. Months passed, and Rusty transformed. He and Pippa became inseparable, sharing toys and napping near each other, their bond a quiet miracle. Emily's program launched, training volunteers to rehabilitate dogs like Rusty, using her logs as a guide. She named it Harper's Haven, honoring her father's legacy. Rusty, once a ghost of his past, became a symbol of redemption, greeting visitors with a wagging tail, his scars a testament to survival. On a crisp spring morning, Emily sat in her backyard, Rusty and Pippa sprawled on the grass, the park's oaks whispering beyond the fence. She scratched Rusty's ears, his eyes half closed in contentment. "We did it, boy," she said, her voice soft. The journal lay open beside her, her father's words a bridge between past and present. Saving Rusty had uncovered Crane's crimes and healed a piece of her grief, proving that second chances could mend even the deepest wounds. As Rusty leaned into her, Pippa's tail thumped nearby, and Emily felt her father's presence in the warmth of the moment, a legacy of love that would carry on.